Welcome to the first of two videos showing you how to use the Core Knowledge Science curriculum. Now, in this first video, I'm going to be showing you how the science curriculum works, the resources you'll need to download, and we'll take a detailed tour of the introduction portion of the teacher's guide, which contains helpful information for using the curriculum. In the next video, I'll take you on a detailed tour of a couple of example lessons so you'll be well set up to use this curriculum to homeschool. All right, before we start, a couple things. First, the Core Knowledge curriculum I will be showing you today is free to download from the Core Knowledge Foundation's website. Now, these are downloadable PDF files, so you can easily view them on a tablet or laptop, and you can even print them if you want to. Next, be sure to visit my website, homeschoolworkplans.com, where I have grade-specific organization guides and a daily schedule available. My goal is to take the guesswork and expense out of providing your student with a high-quality education at home by giving you the resources you need to use this free curriculum. And finally, in this video and the next video, I'm going to be using the second grade unit on electricity and magnetism as an example. But please keep in mind that all Core Knowledge Science curriculum is laid out in basically the same format. So no matter which grade level the curriculum you're using, the information in this video will still apply. All right, let's dive in and get started. So the first step to using the Core Knowledge Science curriculum is to download the materials for free from the Core Knowledge Foundation. Now, be sure to check out my video on how to download the files. Because each grade level has multiple units, it can seem a tad overwhelming when you first get on their site and try to figure out what you're supposed to download. But once you get the rhythm of it, it's actually pretty easy, and my video will walk you through the process step by step. And you can find that video both on my website as well as my YouTube channel. So each grade level of the science curriculum typically includes 5 or 6 units, and every student will need to start with the first unit for their grade level and then move through the units in order throughout the school year. So for example, these are all the science units for second grade. Now, I will mention that Core Knowledge is in the process of releasing middle school material. So I'm recording this at the beginning of 2022, and at the moment, there is a full slate of science materials available from Core Knowledge for kindergarten through 5th grade. So if your student is in one of those grades, you're fine. The whole year of materials is there for you to download now. Now, I'm hopeful the 6th through 8th grade science units will be available in relatively the near future, but as far as I know, Core Knowledge hasn't specifically mentioned their timeline for those higher grade levels being released. So once you've downloaded the files from the Core Knowledge website, you'll have a teacher's guide and a student reader for each unit. Now, both of these are PDF files, so the easiest way to use this curriculum is simply to access the teacher's guide on your laptop or tablet and have your student access the student reader on their laptop or tablet when it's time to use that reader during the lesson. Now, you can print the teacher's manual and the student reader. They're both regular PDF files, so they are printable, but both are full color, and the teacher's manual is usually about 200 pages or so. So unless you have access to very inexpensive color printing, it's probably not worth it to print the files. One more option that is available if you really prefer hard copies. Core Knowledge does sell printed copies of both the teacher's guides and the student readers on their website, and they do this for both the history curriculum as well as the science curriculum. So if you want, you can go on there and order those items. You can even order the student readers by themselves. But again, you don't have to purchase anything to use this program. All the materials you'll be using are free to download. Okay, quick note here. There is not a separate workbook file for the science curriculum. So if you're using, for example, the language arts curriculum, you're used to having a workbook to download. There's no workbook in this case. All the worksheets are in the back of the teacher's guide, and you'll want to print those before you start a new unit. And those workbook pages are black and white, and they can be printed double-sided. Okay, here's a quick tip. If you can, print all the activity pages in the back of all the teacher's guides at the beginning of the school year and either put all those pages in a binder or have them spiral bound at your office supply store. I do this with my own kids, and it makes it so much easier because then I have one binder or a bound set of science activity pages for that child for the whole year. Okay, quick reminder that if you download the free organization and prep documents from my website, I have this all laid out for you, including what to print as well as a daily schedule so you know which lesson to do which day. Okay, so now that you'll have the materials downloaded and the activity pages printed, let's start taking a close look at the introduction section of the teacher's guide. Now, as I mentioned earlier, all the science curriculum for core knowledge is laid out in the same way. So information in this tour of the teacher's guide is going to be useful even if you're using another grade level of the program. Each teacher's guide for science consists of 3 main sections: an introduction, the step-by-step lesson plans, and a set of teachers' resources in the back of the guide. And that includes some appendices as well, which often include things like a glossary and support documents, as well as tips for getting set up to do safe science demonstrations, strategies for acquiring materials, things like that. Now, most of the information in the appendices is geared towards classroom teachers. However, there is a section there on what to do when a demonstration or experiment doesn't go as expected. And trust me, as homeschoolers, this is going to happen to us sometimes. So if you get a chance, go ahead and look at that in the first unit for the science grade level you're using. It'll just be in the back of the teacher's manual. And it's just helpful to have some guidance on how to use that failure of an experiment as a learning opportunity. All right, first let's talk about this introduction section. Every core knowledge teacher's manual has an introduction section which will help you get a feel for the material you'll be teaching your student, as well as additional resources and tips. The introduction section starts with an overview of the unit, including the big idea here in the blue box. And below that is a brief overview of what your student will learn during this unit. Now, that big idea is the overall concept that will be regularly reinforced during the lessons for this unit. So for example, this unit is focused on electricity and magnetism, and the overarching idea covered in this unit is the scientific concept of electricity and how people use electricity to make things work. Now below that, you'll see a few paragraphs that provide a high-level overview for you as the adult on your students' likely knowledge of electricity powering items and what they'll learn in this unit. So this is essentially a section saying, the average second grader is going to know these things about electricity, and then here's how we want to expand on that knowledge in this unit. Now, there is additional information in this section talking about the limits of what will be taught in the unit, because in reality, a second grader, 7, 8 years old, doesn't really need a full understanding of the physics behind definitions like charge, force, or power. There are some concepts that are simply better introduced when they're a bit older. So moving on, the teacher's guide does provide some explanations that tie directly to national science standards for education. Now, as a homeschooler, you don't need to worry about these specific notes on alignment. Now, if you're planning on sending your child back to school at some point, you may be concerned about whether they will be caught up with whatever the standards are that your school is using. So know that the core knowledge curriculum is aligned to national science standards, so following the lessons as laid out in each unit will keep them on track if your district or local private schools are using those standards, which they likely are. All right, down at the bottom of the first page and continuing on to the second page is a section outlining what students should already know. Now, a quick note here, the core knowledge curriculum is built on the idea that students will gain an increasing level of width and depth to their knowledge base as they progress through grade levels. This is not just for science. This is the philosophy of core knowledge curriculum in general, for their history and geography curriculum, for their language arts curriculum, and the science curriculum. We want kids' knowledge to expand as they grow. Now, this section is listing out specific concepts a student would have learned during kindergarten and first grade that will be helpful for them in understanding this second grade unit. If you've previously used core knowledge for kindergarten and first grade, then this is just going to be a quick list review, so you can work in small amounts of review as needed as you work through the lessons in this unit. But what if you're new to this curriculum, or maybe you're even new to homeschooling altogether? Okay, first, don't panic. You're not behind or anything like that. You'll just be using this list a little differently. I'd encourage you to go through this list and check off items you're pretty sure your child already knows. For example, they've probably already figured out over the last few years that a bigger push or pull makes things speed up, slow down, or change direction more quickly. Now, if you come to something, though, and you aren't sure if they know it, simply make a note, and you'll just take a few moments to explain that information to them when it comes up in a lesson. I know sometimes as homeschoolers, especially if you're brand new to homeschooling, it can seem overwhelming because maybe you don't have a great science background yourself. Many of us didn't grow up with a great science education. But I do want to remind you that not only are these teacher's guides really well set up to help you, expand your knowledge base and help you teach your child, We're talking about 7 and 8-year-olds here. And even if we're talking about 9 and 10-year-olds, the scientific concepts that they're being taught are ultimately fairly simple, right? Because they're kids. So the background information in these teachers' guides is more than adequate, not only to educate you as an adult, but to provide you with that information that you can rely on so you can be up to speed to provide your student these really great, rich lessons. All right, the final section starting halfway down the second page outlines what students will learn during this unit. Now, don't worry too much about this section. If you follow the lessons as they're laid out in the unit, learning these concepts is going to be a natural outcome of completing the unit. Next up, there's a section talking about the student reader. Now, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, the main files you'll be using to teach your students science are the teacher's guide we're taking the tour of now and the student reader. And you will download both of these files from the Core Knowledge website in that PDF format. When you work through a lesson, you'll be accessing the teacher's guide on your tablet or laptop, and then you'll just open that student reader file on your student's tablet or laptop so you can work through the material together. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are hard copies available to purchase from Core Knowledge for these books. And this year, I decided to do something new, and I ordered the student readers for my current 4th grader. And they're really nice. Here's a picture of one. This is one of her science units for 4th grade. They're high quality, they're bright, they're colorful. But again, I want to emphasize you don't have to buy anything to use this curriculum. Core Knowledge has made these files free to download for everyone, and my goal is to have put together all these resources for you so that you can use this free curriculum successfully. Okay, so moving on, don't worry too much about this pacing section here at the bottom. Setting up a full year of what to do each school day is many, many hours of work. I can say that because I've done it for you. I have put in the time and energy of going through every single science unit for kindergarten all the way through 5th grade. I've done those so far, and getting that all scheduled out for you. So you don't have to put in that effort. You can just go ahead and download that free daily schedule from my website, and in a few minutes I'll show you what that looks like. All right, next up, we have this helpful chart that gives an overview of the lessons in this unit. Now, the unit itself has a big question that provides the framework for the unit. So for this unit on electricity and magnetism, the big question is, why do the lights sometimes go out during a thunderstorm? Now, I realize that might seem like a simple question, but answering it thoroughly and really understanding what's happening there actually requires a significant understanding of concepts around electricity and magnetism. And that's what you're going to be working on in this unit. Now, this unit is broken up into 10 lessons, and you can see the lesson titles here as well as the specific questions addressed for each lesson. So for example, in lesson 3, the title is, What are the types of electricity? And the lesson question that we're going to be focused on in that lesson is how are static electricity and electric current different? Now, a quick note here before we move on. There are 10 lessons in this unit, but they're scheduled to be covered over 15 school days. Some lessons cover multiple days. Generally, you're looking at 1 to 3 days per lesson. So that free schedule I have on my website is going to make your life a lot easier because you'll be able to see just by glancing at it what you need to do each school day. And you won't be stuck trying to figure out how to divide up 10 lessons over 15 school days. On the next page, you'll see sections for activity pages. All activity pages are located in the back of the teacher's guide for the unit. That's the same for every science unit. There's also a section here with a link to Core Knowledge's online resources website for science units. It is a great resource. It's going to really provide richness and depth to your lessons. And when I give you a detailed tour in the next video of a couple of lesson sets, we will go on that website and I will show you how it works. So what you really have here on this page is kind of this overview of what you need to print and the resource and the website you need to have handy and all of that. And I just want to remind you that if you've downloaded the free organization and prep documents from my website, I've already planned all this out for you. So there's a checklist for what to do to get ready for each level, grade level of science curriculum, as well as what you need to print or download for each unit, just to make it easy for you. Now, down at the bottom is a section discussing some teaching strategies you'll likely want to use for the Core Knowledge science units. One of the things that I really appreciate about this curriculum is that Core Knowledge is clearly committed to helping all of us become better teachers, even those of us who are homeschooling with just 1 or 2 students. Now, the section down at the bottom of the page and continuing on to the next page lays out strategies that can be really helpful when we're teaching. Things like asking driving questions, encouraging scientific thinking, and making frequent connections. And if this sounds a little bit overwhelming right now, again, if you're new to homeschooling, this may just seem like a lot. Don't worry about it. You're going to practice. You're going to get better. You're going to be a great teacher for your kids. Okay, the next 2 pages are present in every Core Knowledge Science unit. These are really important. You might even want to print these ones. So this is the list of materials and equipment you're going to need to have on hand to perform the demonstrations and experiments for the unit. Now, I realize this looks like a long list of things, but before you panic, let me quickly point out a few things here. First, the items on this list are almost all normal household items. Now, if you've done any research on different science curriculums homeschoolers can use, one of the things you're going to come across is that a lot of the curriculums have difficult material lists, lists where you're going to have to find a lot of really rare or strange materials. That's not how the Core Knowledge Science curriculum works. Remember, this curriculum was written for busy classroom teachers who also don't have time and energy to track down supplies. So almost everything on these lists is pretty typical stuff you're going to have around the house, and even the stuff that you don't isn't hard to track down. I think the hardest thing I've had this year in 4th grade is we had to come up with a pizza box for a solar oven. So, it's not, these aren't really difficult things to find. Okay, second, this list for the unit is broken out by lesson, so you can quickly see what items you need for each lesson in advance. All right, and one more quick note. I have been homeschooling for a long time, 10 years. And the thing I personally struggle with most, and the thing that I know so many homeschooling parents who struggle with, is being organized enough to do the demonstrations and experiments in a science curriculum. So I'm going to tell you a few things that I have found personally helpful. One is print off the materials list for each unit before the unit and gather the supplies. If you really want to go for like a gold medal in organization, print off all the lists for all the units for the year and go through and figure out what are the things you normally have around the house and what are the things you don't normally have, and then work on getting those. And then what I do is I put them in a plastic container that sits up high on a shelf away from my curious children, because if I leave it down, those supplies are going to disappear into some other project they come up with. All right. So I also realize that many of you, like me, may be homeschooling multiple kids. You're likely holding down a job as well. So finding time to do hands-on science can be legitimately difficult. We all struggle with this. So besides having the supplies ready to go in advance, which does really help with the time commitment, I promise, sometimes you'll be able to find videos on YouTube or similar demonstrations you can use kind of in a pinch. So let me give you an example. Remember I told you a few minutes ago I needed a pizza box for a solar oven? Well, I did not manage to get a pizza box in time. And that day I really did not have time to build a solar oven. I'm sure it would have been a lot of fun, but I didn't have the time. So I found a video on YouTube and we watched someone else build a solar oven, and we were able to do the worksheets for the lesson, and my daughter learned the concepts, and it was fine. It really is fine sometimes to look for those experiments online. Also, I am looking right now at possibly putting together some videos of the science experiments that are used throughout the Core Knowledge Science units. So keep an eye on my website, my YouTube channel. Hopefully those will pop up at some point too. All right, so next up in the teacher's manual is this blank pacing guide. This is meant for classroom teachers, and it's just letting them know they should plan to spend about 15 school days on this unit, and it gives them blank space to plan out what to do. Now, as I mentioned earlier, planning out a daily schedule is a lot of work, especially if you're new to a curriculum or even just new to this curriculum. It takes a long time to get a feel for how lessons flow, how much time different activities take, and you really do need to know those things to have any idea how you would divide up 10 lessons over 15 school days. That's not really an intuitive thing. So if nothing else, that would probably seem like an overwhelming project right out of the gate. And right there, that's something that would keep a homeschooling parent maybe from using a curriculum like this one. Even though it's an amazing curriculum, it's a lot of work to do that planning. But don't worry, as I mentioned earlier, I have gone through and laid out day-by-day work plans for each science unit for you, along with all the planning for all the other subjects as well. So this is an example of week 20 for second grade. So you're going to know exactly what you need to do for each school day. And that free daily schedule is just available on my website for you to download. All right, that brings us to this last portion of the introduction section of the teacher's guide. As you're getting ready to teach this unit, this page you see here on the left is really helpful. It lays out the name of the lesson question, what advanced preparation is required. Sometimes you're going to need to spend 5-10 minutes in advance getting ready. And now this will make more sense when we walk through the step-by-step lesson plans in the next video. But as a preview, some lessons are primarily focused on reading a chapter in the student reader and discussing what was read. Some lessons are really centered around an investigation, like a demonstration or an experiment, and doing a worksheet. And then that page on the right lays out the sequence of concepts that will be taught and which lessons will cover which material. So this is helpful for just giving you that higher level sense of organization as you work through the unit. All right, so that concludes the introduction section. Now, before you move on to video number 2, where I'm going to give you that detailed tour of several step-by-step lessons, I want to quickly remind you of a few things. First, all the core knowledge science curriculum teacher's guides are laid out in essentially the same way. So I know this video and all my other videos probably seem like a lot of information, but I assure you that once you get a feel for one of these science teacher's guides, you're going to be in a good position to navigate any of the science units. Second, I would really encourage you to start each new unit by making a habit of reading that overview section, including the lists of what your students should already know, what they'll learn. Those portions, even just those portions, will put you in a better place to work through the information in the unit with confidence. Also, gathering materials and equipment in advance and kind of reviewing that unit overview can be really helpful for staying organized and keeping you efficient on a daily basis. Please be sure to download the organization and prep documents from my website. I am a huge fan of the core knowledge curriculum. I have found this to be the best curriculum I can use to teach my own kids after all of these years. And my goal is to make it easy for you to use this curriculum. And so I have put together all these free resources. I've done all this organization and scheduling work for you because I want this to be something you can do. Now, the daily schedule is going to tell you what to work on each day. My organization documents are going to help you get ready to teach this curriculum on a daily basis. And now that you've gone through this video and you understand the introduction section and how this curriculum is laid out, be sure to move on to video number 2. And I'm going to walk you through step by step several example lessons. Okay, that's it for this video. I'll see you shortly in video number 2.